We're really excited for tonight. We've got two great speakers lined up. We got Jamison Greeley, and he's going to talk to us about Angular 2, which is currently in beta, so it's a great time to get started. And then AJ Larson is going to talk to us about some Angular 1 and applying ES6 classes, making our lives better there. Show of hands, how many people are dabbling in Angular 2 right now? Anybody? Anybody actually building an app they intend to release in it already? Really? Okay. You guys are crazy or awesome. I don't know. That's pretty cool. So before we jump into it, I want to cover a few announcements. We do have our GitHub page where we use their issue tracker to get suggestions for any type of presentations that we want to do. So if you want to go to that and you have some specific topic that would be beneficial to you that you want someone to cover, feel free to go submit your ideas. And also, if you want to go in there and just look through the topics and do a thumbs up on anything that looks interesting, please do. And in addition to that, if you want to speak, go ahead and submit a topic and put your name on it. We'd love to have you. And if anyone here would like to speak, feel free to reach out to me at any time during the meetup. We'd love to have you. And then another thing I want to talk about is just there's opportunities to volunteer. There's a lot that goes into putting on the meetup. And so if you're interested in getting involved, that would be great. Feel free to reach out to us, myself or Matt Winchester. And then the last thing I wanted to cover is that if you're not following us on Twitter, please do. It's at AngularJS Utah. And we recently tweeted this survey. We'd love to have everybody here, as well as anybody that's in Utah in general. It's kind of a broad survey to gather information about what we're looking for in a meetup, and it'll help us as organizers to tweak it and make sure that we're getting exactly what you guys want. Okay, well, without further ado, let's jump into Jamison. Come on up.
All right, can everyone hear me? Good, good. All right, so tonight what we're going to do is we're actually going to build the world's ugliest to-do MVC, but it should at least give you guys an idea of how to do an Angular 2 app. So to start off, I have kind of templated the sort of severe basics you need to get started. In this case, like our index file. And are these large enough? Can everyone read these? Okay. Any issues? No? Okay, good. Hey, Jason, can we dim some lights? Oh, yeah, actually, I could probably do a light thing. Okay, there we go. All right, we'll do that. So there's nothing particularly special going on here. I just have a simple node server that's serving up files. So this isn't bundled or anything, and that's something that's kind of going to depend on what your app needs to do. But there are a bunch of files at this point to do like ES6 polyfilling. You need RxJS, you need Zone.js, all this sort of stuff that you would end up bundling into a sort of vendor file. And then I'm using System.js to load everything. There's nothing special going on here. The only real config is informing System that anything I import that's on this app path, just to tell it what format it is and to assume it's JavaScript. So nothing too special going on here. The real meat of the application happens when you go into the Bootstrap file. For everyone who's used to Angular 1, you may remember that Angular actually had a method to manually bootstrap your app instead of using ng-app or ng-controller. And that's kind of the new default in Angular 2. You have to tell it when to bootstrap, and you're going to end up giving it a component to start bootstrapping with. In this case, I've told it about a component that hasn't been filled out. So as you can see on the page, there's JavaScript errors, and we actually don't have anything loaded. But this is what you're going to end up doing. The other thing that's kind of important is you have this array that's a parameter. For now, we have it empty, but in the future, and later on tonight, if we get to that point, this is actually how you're going to set up your dependency injection and your custom providers, your custom factories, all your services, stuff like that kind of goes in here. But for now, we'll move past that. So let's get our app component going. App.typescript. So I am doing this in TypeScript. You can do it in ES5, ES6, whatever you want. But for the purposes of tonight, I'm going with what the Angular team sort of recommends and doing TypeScript. So the big difference that happens in Angular 2 is you no longer have directives to do your reusable UI components. Instead, directives in Angular 2 are more focused on adding behavior to objects. Instead, when you want to create reusable UI, you create a component. So the first thing you need to do is import the component decorator from Angular 2 core. And then you have a class that gets your component decoration. And, oops. This object that you use to configure it might look a little familiar. It's actually incredibly similar to the object you would return in your directive factories in Angular 1. So you're going to specify things like your template or template URL. The thing I've actually been doing is templated strings to do templates. And this is actually one part of Angular 2 that's kind of most in flux right now. A lot of people are kind of leaning towards templated strings because this allows you to pre-fill Angular's template cache. It reduces the number of XHRs you have to do to load everything, all that sort of fun stuff. But the tooling around it kind of sucks. You know, it's just a string, so you don't get all your fancy completions and what have you. There's work on this in the future, in the near future that's coming in. And one thing I've seen a lot of people start doing is leveraging TypeScript support for JSX and custom JSX factories to actually do JSX templates, but in this case, that's not what we have. So we're just going to do a template string that says hello world. The other thing that you need to do before you had your restrict that told Angular how to bind things, and you had your factory kind of bound to this magic string that kind of turned into this magic thing that worked on the DOM, and it was kind of a lot of magic going on. But instead in Angular 2, it's pretty simple to tell it how to find your thing in the DOM. You just give it a CSS selector. Match this thing and inject my component into it. Pretty simple. So if we save and let this compile, we should get hello world. Yay. We have our very, very basic Angular app. So to do a todo MVC, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's just a simple little kind of demo app where you put in to-dos, you mark them complete, that sort of thing. So we'd want to be able to get a list of to-dos on the page. So your controller for your component, instead of being any number of weird things that Angular 1 allowed you to do, is just your class. So we want to give it some to-dos, which is just an array. And let's give it some things to do. Maybe we'll do a Batman's to-do list. So we're going to fight crime. And that's not done yet, because Batman's never done fighting crime. We're going to clean the Batcave. Stuff like that. And then getting this on the page, traditionally in like Angular 1, you would use ng4. You know, we'd have maybe a UL for these things. And you would do a list item for each, and you do ng4, to do, in, to dos, all this sort of stuff. And this remains kind of the same. Instead of doing like a shish kebabbed magic ng4, there is a construct called ng4. You're going to tell it that to do is a variable that you're going to use in your template. And we're going to use for of, because these loops now match JavaScript loops. So for in is going to return an index instead of the actual item we want, and for of will return the item we care about. And the other thing you need to do is toss a star in front of this. And this is kind of one of the weird things about Angular 2. They have this new template syntax. And basically what the star is telling Angular is that whatever this template or whatever this directive does, take the object it's on and use it as a template for that other directive. So in this case, we're using our li as the template for ng4. So close out our li, come in here, and we'll just put todo.text. And if we let that go, hey, it kind of works. There is in current builds of Angular, and this is something that's kind of fluctuating back and forth, so take this part with a grain of salt, but there's a few magic directives that'll just automatically work, like ng4. But what you would typically do is import your directive to common, and then let your component know that you have a directive that you want it to use. And you would do that for every directive that's in this component's template. But again, ng4, kind of right now, they keep going back and forth on this, but it's a magical one that would work. Ngif, all sorts of the built-in directives. Kind of just magically work. So now we have a to-do list. Nothing overly fancy going on here. But one of the big problems you can have in JavaScript, you have all these objects, and then someone comes along and, oh no, they make this thing that doesn't have the right properties. And now, if you try to use it in your object, it doesn't show up, oh no. And this is a good case where you could leverage types in TypeScript. I have a GitHub repo up for this demo that starts leveraging types. Is that something anyone would be interested in seeing tonight, or would you rather just go with vanilla JavaScript objects? Types, objects? Types. We'll do types. Cool. So in that case, let's come over here and let's make a new model class. Export class to do, which just has text, which is a string, and done, which is a Boolean. And then if we go back to our component, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. We can import our model, use that. But now we have the issue of we're creating our data and we're using it within the same component. And so the way you would generally abstract this in traditional Angular apps is to kind of wrap this all up in a service that would fetch your data. So let's go build ourselves a service. And services overall are pretty straightforward. You're just going to export a class. Maybe it'll have a getAll function that returns an array of to-dos, which we need to import. Okay. And then it might have this private items, which is a to-do array. And we'll return items here. Oh, wait, sorry. Needed this on this. Then to wire this up for Angular is actually really simple. We're going to import this decorator called injectable from Angular to core. And we're just going to tell Angular that this class is injectable. There's no special arguments. There's no sort of magic to it. It's pretty straightforward. And then coming up into our Bootstrap, this is where we get back to that array. Where we just tell Angular that we have this thing that we want to be able to inject into our components, into our services, into whatever we like. Then to get a hold of that in our app, it's pretty simple. We give our component a constructor, and we just tell it that we have an argument of to service that is of type to do service. And Angular can figure it out from there. Oh, sorry, need to import that. Oh, dear Lord, I can't type. Okay. And one of the things you actually can do with these constructors, there's a decorator called inject, and you can actually come over into, for example, to do service, and you can say that this object has a name. You know, you can name it foo, and then you can come over to wherever you're using it and pull in another decorator called inject and get that same named object. And this can be kind of useful if you want to have more than one object floating around that might be configured differently, might point to different things. This is kind of something I'm still iffy on myself, but there's use cases for having these named injectors, but overall, you can get away with just having a, if I can use my keyboard, having just the bare constructor argument. One of the other handy things that TypeScript allows you to do is add an access modifier onto that argument, and now it's a property on your class. And by making it public, that also means our template can get access to it. So we can do things like take our to-do service and get all. And then if we save this guy, and we save this guy, and probably take that off, we should have a nice working service. Oh, I should probably give it some data, hey? So let's come over here to our, not that. Give me the TypeScript, thank you. We'll just borrow these. Get rid of you. And come back here. No, to-do service, to-do service. And stick that there. So now we have our type enforcement. We have all our data access centralized into one place, and it all builds into a set of components that we can actually use. Why do you say there's an unsaved file? That's why you say there's an unsaved file. So one cool thing that actually happens with this, because we centralized all our data access into one place, we can actually leverage a little cool thing that Angular is doing in the background that's not necessarily apparent. When you have a method like our getAll function in our to-do service that returns a sort of plain object like that, and it's decorated with injectable, what Angular will actually do is they'll wrap this method and return an observable instead. So if we modify our array of to-dos, all the components that have used this service to get their data will automatically get the updated data sets, which is pretty handy. So let's leverage this. Let's give ourselves a way to add a new to-do. So we'll do an input of type text. But, well, now we need something to bind this into. So let's give ourselves a new to-do that we can start working with. And we'll make this.new to-do a new to-do. So, now how do we get the property in there? Well, the Angular syntax for this is pretty simple. We use the square brackets to say we're going to set a property on this object. We're in this case going to set the value to be new to-do dot text. And it's pretty simple. And then, well, now we want to listen for it to change so we can update that text. So we use parentheses, which means we're listening to an event. In this case, we want to listen to the change event. And we want to call, I don't know, a set text function in order to get this. And just like in Angular 1, we have access to the event that's triggering this. So we can get the target, we can get the value, and set our text on that. So then if we make set text in here, that takes a string. We can say this.newToDo.text equals string. And that works out well enough. But this whole thing, kind of gross. You know, you have all this kind of JavaScripty code in here. And we can shorten it up. We can give this input. We'll call it text. That makes more sense. We can use this hash to sort of give this, this DOM object a variable that we can then use later in our template. So we can do things like now just say text.value over here instead of having to worry about event targets and handling the event and all that fun stuff. And you can do this with any arbitrary DOM object. All the hash does is identify a new variable for Angular to keep track of. So then the other thing we want to do is we want to have a button. And we'll just say create. So this way we can save our to-do. And we're going to listen for the click event. And on click, we're going to save new to-do. And then down here, we can do save new to-do. So then we can take our to-do service. We can, for example, we'll add a method to handle this, but we'll add the new to-do, and then make new to-do a new to-do to keep working with. And then in our to-do service, we'll make an add that takes a to-do, and we'll add our to-do to the list. Okay, so as soon as that compiles and reloads, well, yeah, things are getting a little hairy. That's because, hi there, Edge, I don't want to print, thank you. Because in our to-do, that's not the file I wanted. In our to-do, our text starts out as undefined, so we get that nasty little bit in the text box. So let's fix that, and we'll default this to false while we're at it. So that should fix that. And am I doing something weird on the button? Oh, I forgot a quote. That's why that's not working. Okay. So now if we do that and wait for it to compile. Come on, friend, stop taking your time. Now we can add an entry for, say, fighting Killer Croc. We create it, bam, appears on the list. No work needed on the side of the service because it returned an observable, and the template automatically listens to this observable, grabs the new to-do, templates it out. Pretty simple stuff. So the other thing we want to do, we want to be able to mark these as done. So let's expand our li. Let's give it a span to wrap this. And let's give it a checkbox so we can modify this. Now, we kind of want this to work similar to a two-way data binding in Angular 2, where we can use it to listen for changes on the to-do's status, and we can also change it. And the way you do this is kind of funky, but you use the square bracket to set the value, use the paren to listen for changes to the value, and we're going to change the value of the thing in this case, and we're going to set it to to-do.done. And that's your two-way data binding. And these are kind of weird. They're a big point of contention because that's not very intuitive. You look at that and you're like, what does this mean? But for now, that's how you would do a two-way data binding. And we have our checkboxes. But toggling these, not doing much. Let's give it some style so it looks a little bit better. And so one of the things you can do, you can give a styles array, or URL if you have a CSS file you want to do. But you can give it this array. And what's cool about doing it this way is that Angular will emulate web components. So any of the styles you put in this will just automatically be scoped into your component and won't leak outside of it. But that's kind of, I don't know. It's a little hard to demonstrate in something like this because it's the ugliest sin to do MVC, but we just kind of want to do something like to do text.done gets a fancy text decoration. So how do we do something like ng class? That is pretty simple, all said and done. So we'll give it our normal class of to do text. And then to set a class, they don't have a direct sort of replacement for ng class in Angular 2. Instead, you set properties on the object. So you would do class.done as a setter, an Angular setter, sorry. And that's just based on to-do.done. So now we can have things like strike through our text when a to-do is finished, when it's done compiling. For the record, doing TypeScript in watch mode on Windows, kind of slow, which sucks, but hey. Now we have all this. No, why are you not working? What are you doing? Am I doing bad CSS? To-do text. Class not done. Do you have the class? You do not have the class. Angular, what are you doing? So this is one of the things where it's getting kind of difficult to use Angular in early stages. 1 week, your code will work. The next, they release a new beta, and some things don't work like you expect them to. I built this on beta 3 and made the mistake of upgrading, and yeah. Apparently now, class setters don't want to work. But that is what you would do if it were working, which is unfortunate. So I guess we'll continue on without that. So the next big thing that's pretty common in Angular apps is building filters. And filters do make a comeback in Angular 2, but they look a bit different. Instead, they're called pipes now. So to build a pipe, let's build a finished pipe. And that way, when a to-do is finished, we can filter it out of the list. You import a pipe decorator from Angular. You make your class. And you decorate it. And pipe decorators are pretty simple. They take a name, in this case we'll say finished, and you can optionally pass pure, but I'm not sure what that does because the documentation for it is completely empty. So your guess is as good as mine. And pipes are pretty simple. They have one function named transform, that takes a value and it takes a set of attributes. So in this case, because we're receiving an array of to-dos, we're going to do value.filter. You know what? We'll give this a type. To-do array import to-do from to-do filter to-dos that are done or not done. Okay. So now you go over to your app and I pick the wrong file again. Just like before, oh wait, sorry, Bootstrap. Just like before when you created your service, you just toss it in your injector configuration. So we'll import to do our finished pipe from finish. Wow, I cannot spell finished to save my life tonight. And you just toss that guy in here. So if we go back to our app, it's again pretty simple to use. Just in your template, just like in Angular 1, you toss a pipe there and you put the name of your pipe. It compiles and it slowly loads. Oh no, what did I do wrong? Did I spell finished wrong? Finished. Ah, whoever called out import, thank you. You're a lifesaver. Just like directives, you have to tell your component what pipes you want to use. So we import our type, and down here next to directives, we tell it about pipes. Now it'll work. But there's kind of a hidden gotcha in using this. And as soon as it compiles, I'll show you. Oh no, the filter doesn't work. Except it does. The problem is pipes are designed to be used with immutable data. So the setup that we have with our service, where we're just modifying the object in place, doesn't work with a pipe. So what you end up having to do, for example, with the add, we can add a new thing to fight Catwoman. And it's not going to show up. And that's because we're just appending to our existing array. So what you end up having to do, for example, in your add method, instead of just adding to the array, you're going to create a new one to support the immutable data pattern. But man, creating a new array from that every time, ugh. But TypeScript and ES6 have this fancy spread operator. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, take the contents of this items and just echo it into this new array. Just copy them piece by piece and add the new to-do to it. So now if we add a to-do after it recompiles, it'll show up on the list, the pipe will activate, let it through, everything works as soon as it compiles. There you go. So now if we say we want to fight Catwoman, it shows up on the list. So you kind of have to do the same thing if you want to mutate an item. For example, if we wanted to toggle the done status of it, first we would get the index of it. So we'll get the index. And then what we're going to do, we're going to flip to-do's done status. And we're going to create our new array. And similar to the other one, we can use the spread operator to help us and keep our code a bit cleaner. So we'll spread a slice of all the elements up to that index, not including it. That needs to be a comma. We'll add the new to do, or we'll add the modified to do, and then we'll spread all the items after that index. And that way, if we toggle one, we can see it change in the list and refilter it. So in order to do that, what we're going to end up having to do, we add a change listener on this guy. Actually, what we can do, to do service, toggle to do, pass it the to do we're using at this point in the template. Let it recompile. And now items will properly disappear because we're creating new arrays using immutable data. And so that's one of the big patterns. Okay, wrapping up. Cool. Last tidbit, immutable data, big thing on Angular 2. I guess that kind of creates a complete app. It shows you all the basics, and I'm basically out of time, so I'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone. I hope that was informative.
All right, can everybody hear me? No? Okay, bummer. It's actually good for me. It makes my job easier. All right, so getting things set up here. Do we need to swap it to separate adapter? Oh, just right here? Ah, sweet. Nothing's being shared. So I was signed in here. What was that? I can't see.
Hey, while we're getting set up, there's a little pizza left in the back, so if you're still hungry, go back for seconds. And then I also forgot to mention at the start, one big thank you to Adobe for sponsoring this. This is a great space. We've been here for more than a year. It's been great. And then also another sponsor is Workfront. They've provided food for us every month ever since we started, so it's been great. And this is the first time we've ever had pizza. How was it? Well, good.
All right, so we're getting set up to where I will also be a presenter on the Adobe Connect. It dropped me as a presenter because it doesn't like me. So bear with for just a second here. Let's see here. Where'd it go? Share my screen. Okay, perfect. All right, so getting to the right spot here, we want full screen. Woohoo. All right, so my talk today was titled ES6 with Angular 1X, because I mean, Angular 2 is awesome, it looks great, but it's not done yet. So with it not being quite done yet, maybe some of us don't want to quite start using it yet for what we're getting ready to release and whatnot. So I thought I'd kind of stick around and take a look at Angular 1X with ES6, also with a little bit of TypeScript, because we're kind of I want to start doing my Angular to start getting ready for Angular 2. So kind of like Jeremy talked about last week, here's what you can hit to start getting ready to start thinking about your apps a little bit differently. So my name is AJ Larson, and I started coming to these meetups about a year ago, maybe a little bit over. You talked about quick mocks. We were in the other room. I think we had Rumby for dinner, something like that. I mean, it's the highlight of coming here, almost the biggest highlight of coming here. We talked about Webpack as well, and I was picking out a little bit, still working on my degree. I'm actually in software quality assurance, so Angular's a side gig for me that I want to be a full-time gig. I am really enjoying it. So regardless, this is coming from a less syntactically refined point of view. Basically, the things I would have wanted to know a little while ago before I started figuring them out for myself. So it's not straight just Angular 1 and ES6, but it's going to have a little bit of everything on it. So Angular 2, why do we care? Kind of like Simba talks about, sometimes we hate change because it's hard, but it is worth it, and Angular 2 is going to be worth it. Faster cross-platform, you've got the whole 9 yards, a lot of good things coming from it. And ES6 and TypeScript as well, they're not going to do everything. There's quite a few differences just in the basic markup as we saw from our previous discussion, but getting used to using this stuff now will make it a lot easier for us, a lot easier for me when the time comes when Angular 2's at least a little more stable or on its regular release. So how we're going to get ready for it, if you want to use ES6, if you want to use TypeScript, you're going to need a pre-compiler. You're going to need loaders, your different options, what you can use for it. Then we're going to want to know why we care about ES6 to begin with over ES5. And then some good patterns that we can start using now in Angular 1X to get rolling there. So it's kind of our little roadmap for where things are going today. My phone keeps rotating. Let me shut that off so I can actually slide without looking. It's a skill, sliding without looking. Okay, so I was tempted to read this in a Yoda voice. My wife convinced me not to. I am a Star Wars fan, but obviously. So we've got options for pre-compilers for different things that we can use. You got Webpack. My wife also thought I was actually going to make grunting and gulping noises. I told her no. We've got grunt and we've got gulp. I mean, you've got other stuff that you can use out there. TypeScript with VS Code was being used for Angular 2, it looked like. So personally, I really like Webpack. Maybe it's because I'm biased because that was my first meetup. And I got about 50% of what was being talked about, missed the rest, and went, I really need to go figure this out. So I've stuck with Webpack. So that's what I used for mine. But you need something, because something needs to go in and take the ES6 that is not browser compatible, the TypeScript that's not browser compatible, and make it, retrofit it back into ES5. So you got a couple loader options. If you're using ES6, I recommend Babel. Babel's great. I haven't had a problem with it yet. There's some other ones out there, but Babel loader's great. TypeScript, same difference. Why do we care about TypeScript? Angular 2 was written in TypeScript, so it's probably a good idea. Plus, honestly, not knowing all of my syntaxes very well, I thought that I'd be hitting TypeScript and have this whole new thing to learn. And I loaded up the docs, I loaded up the examples and went, holy cow, this is easy. Why wasn't I doing it already? So it's really not that much of a difference in effort to start using TypeScript now. So I definitely recommend going that route, but all the same patterns you use for ES6, they're there in TypeScript. It's already there. So, I mean, depending how you set up your loaders, different compilers, different things, super easy though. In Webpack, I just put that snippet right there. So, the reason that ES6 and those patterns that are also there in TypeScript is so awesome, and things just shut off. Let me see. Screensaver. Yeah. No, it just, my monitor went to sleep apparently. Goodness. There we go. I'll have to bump it every once in a while. I just think better and talk better when I'm moving rather than just standing in front of the computer. So, the old way that we used to do it in ES5 and in Angular 1X is up here on the right. Like it calls out there, every file you've got, you're going to need some kind of Angular declaration to, just the boilerplate to get your app up on there. Declare whether it's factory, a service, directive, whatever it is you're doing. You've got, and that's the thing, you've also got a whole ton of different components. services and factories kind of being interchangeable with providers, and then you've got directives, you've got your config, you've got everything. And then, so it gets pretty verbose. But on top of that, so Angular 1 and ES5, you're a little more verbose just in how you're writing things. Anonymous functions, you have to write out function every time. Not a big deal, but you have to write out function every time, and it's kind of a pain. So you've got that hassle as well. And then a lot of times you're going to have to rewrite things, no inheritance, no way to know that a dog has everything an animal has without rewriting the whole thing. So, and then on the verbose side as well, you've got all of your different files loaded on your index, unless you've got a precompiler, something like that. But smaller stuff, but still, it adds up. So a lot of stuff that ES6 makes a little better for us, makes it a little easier. So getting the same kind of things done here in this snippet as we did in the ES5 way, we just got a couple of files with classes. We've got a very basic animal class, takes in a name and an age. You've got the getInfo function that pops right off of it. I didn't have to write function, and I didn't have to write var getInfo equals function, the whole thing there. So it's easy. I mean, it's simple, but it makes it nice for me. And then you just export the thing at the bottom. Then, hey, I want to make a dog, but I don't want to lose all the effort that I did on the animal, and I don't want to have to add the maintenance work to keep up both sides. I'm just going to import the animal and extend the animal class. And it's really simple to work with a super class. You just use the word super. It's, like I said, really, really easy. So pass in the variables on the constructor that you want just to super by itself, goes right up to the constructor upstairs, assigns them, and then assign whatever you need within it. Then you'll notice for the getInfo as well, you're returning the same string that was already there in the super class, but you're adding on to it whatever you want to. So or you could just completely redo it and make it your own thing, make a new thing. Really easy to overload, really, really simple to use the inheritance stuff that if you've ever worked with object-oriented stuff, which is all that my current employer uses, it's all Java and C# and C++ and like 5 other code bases. It gets really weird. But if you're used to object-oriented stuff, this kind of was just how it was. But it's really nice to see in JavaScript. So one of the reasons that this is so cool, just using a class instead of declaring a function and assigning it the way we would in Angular before, is that, I mean, if you look right up here, is there anything Angular up there right now? There's absolutely nothing Angular. It's all vanilla. It's all vanilla JavaScript. So you can just pop in and say, I'm going to use this class as my service. I'm going to use this as my controller. You can use whatever you want anytime. And the reason I put controller as sort of is because that's not coming with ES6, but it's a reminder up there that this is one of the reasons why it's really cool, is you can pop in there and you can use these classes for whatever you want to. Like I said before, a whole lot less verbose. This is concise. You can just you've got your import-export chains going on, so you just, once everything's supported, and if you're using a precompiler like you have to right now anyway, you just got one file referenced on your index and you're done. You're good to go. So these are the basics of why I really like ES6 over ES5. Now the whole reason how we might think about doing this for Angular 2, we saw an Angular 2 app. This was just a really simple one I pulled just off of one of the websites talking about why we're looking forward to Angular 2. And the idea is the component. You've got this one object, it cares about its data, it knows what it's doing with it, it knows who it's supposed to talk to, and it knows how to put it on the screen. So instead of having all this stuff change through the back end, you've got your component and what it puts on the screen, what it does for you there. It's all self-enclosed, it's all encapsulated. So I wanted to show that you can kind of get that same vibe. You can kind of get that same feeling with Angular 1, with Angular 1X. It's actually really easy. You just have to change the way you think about it a little bit. So it's approximate. It's not perfect. There's a lot of features we don't get, but using a directive with one of your classes as controller as, or used as a controller with a controller as declaration, you can kind of work it the same way as a component. It can still talk to everybody else. It can still take advantage of Angular's injection. And you've got just your directives, you've got your services for outside calls, for getting your data, whatnot. Your directives can talk to each other. It's similar. It's at least going to get you in the same kind of architectural mindset when you're building your application. Now, I know that it was mentioned that we've got strings for templates, that it looks like that might be what they were doing for Angular 2. I also read they might actually be getting to where template URL will work for a relative path, which will make actually storing your files a lot simpler, and that'd be really nice. But I don't know. I like abstracting my templates out into a separate file, but that's just me. That's my own personal plug, kind of like I'm plugging Webpack and Star Wars. So anyhow, example time. I've got a base application, and something that I always kind of wanted coming home from one of these was a really, really stupid, simple app, an example of what was shown up here, so I could go look at it and actually figure out how it works instead of trying to read through a tutorial online. So hopefully that works here, and it is a very stupid, simple app. And I resized it for my monitor, but not for Adobe's, so let's get zoomed in a little bit. So our animals like pizzas, and this is all one directive. You've got one service that's hitting a Node Express backend with MongoDB, but that has nothing to do with ES6 because it's all disconnected anyway. But you've got one directive that has all the information and talks to everything. And as you can see, Poe is a big eater. He likes his pizza. Tigress not so much. So let's see here. But she decides to eat one, or somebody want to give me an animal and a name for it? Anybody want to throw it out there? Cheetah? Bill the cheetah. Thought you were going to go easy and say Chester, so we'll go Bill. So Bill's in there now. He hasn't eaten any pizza. Say what? Trademark. Nice. Well, I'm already in trouble with those, as you can tell by my presentation. So I appreciate that. All right. So really straightforward, really simple functionality, but it gets the point across. So getting back into the code, and again, I resized everything because I didn't think ahead of time that it would be resized for me. So kind of like a component, this is what I've got for the directive, and it's written in a class, and very, very little actual Angular is going on the screen here. Your imports are straight ES6. You can actually import your style sheets this way, and they will apply to the screen for this directive, which is pretty sweet. But I've got it returning the directive object. Now, for my template, again, Angular 1 doesn't support relative pathing, so I just used an old school require. So I've got my template over in a separate file down here. So the template, but we don't need to go into that because it's just the regular HTML we all know. But then we've got controller animal house, controller as animal house. So I guess we can just show that in here. You can see, if I don't scroll too fast, here's the controller as animal house with a lowercase a. Woohoo, it worked. But we've got animal house, the actual controller that I wrote that's got all of the business logic and everything all rolled into one little component here. And I wrote it in TypeScript because, like I said, when I went to the tutorials for ES6 versus TypeScript, it really wasn't much difference. So I just wrote this in TypeScript. You can basically ignore anything up here and ignore anything that has an extra semicolon and a weird word. Just delete that out there if you wanted to use just ES6. But this works really well. So you've got it setting itself up, initializing the whole thing, and then get animals, it calls out to the server, or to the service, excuse me, which reaches out to the database, so on and so forth. But this is all written in the same kind of syntax that you might expect to see in Angular 2. Just using the ES6 that I'm sure a lot of you are already using, the ES6 styles and all that. And it's really straightforward to do. So, and then the only true Angular on this page is the last statement to get our dependency injection into this class. Just the class name dot inject, $inject property. You just set that to whatever it is that you're looking for. So I wanted log and I wanted animal service. I didn't even need to import that though, because kind of like with the old Angular 1 applications, my app file, it knows about it, and so it tells me about it. So I just need to know about I just need to have that little injection down at the bottom to get it rolling. So the only two things on this app are the directive and the service, which, if you're curious about the service, again, very, very straightforward. You get the HTTP and log. Those are the only two Angular components in here. I mean, obviously an HTTP call, that's pretty Angular, but you can use a lot of other things that you want here for your service. The point being, with how little actual Angular there is in this application, one of the big plugs I heard for Angular 2 is how well it will work with ES6, other people's work, how great it'll work with other libraries, other components, other applications other people have written, and you'll just be able to merge it in, use it, no problem. And we can do it with Angular 1 too pretty easily, because there's not that much that you need to have as far as actual Angular in your Angular app anymore. Just let it worry about getting everybody talking to each other, and you're golden. So let's see here. And by the way, I will have links to the sample app up on GitHub and everything in the slides as well. If anybody's like me and wants something to look at later down the line without having to try and remember all of this. So in a quick review, ES6 is awesome because you've got classes, you've got modules, you've got fat arrow syntax, you've got let instead of var. I saw somebody who used weak maps for every single variable on his class because apparently he was using something massive that, the memory issues were actually going to be a problem. So you can do that too. I mean, it's crazy how many options you have that really make JavaScript work a lot more like, get you a lot of the benefits of object-oriented languages without having a whole lot of the hassle of it. I mean, yes, compiler errors when you're using ES6 and TypeScript, but depending on whether you think that's a hassle or not, that's up to you. I like having my errors there before I get my nice pretty page and find out I screwed up. So ES6, we've got a couple links to some really good pages. There's some tutorial in there, a lot of just here's how to think about it kind of thing. Same thing with TypeScript and Angular 2. These are all resources that I've looked at and found valuable to me, so thought I would share. And these slides, I will have a link for the slides up there too. I saw the picture being taken to the screen there, so you can click in there if you lose that, because yellow on blue was probably not my best choice for readability, especially from a cell phone picture. So, but anyhow, there's going to be the link to the repo, the Webpack seed that I used. I love hot reload. I hate setting it up, so I always just clone the seed. It works great. Meanwhile, like I said, I would love to be an Angular developer, so feel free to contact me if any opportunities arise. But yeah, this is why I'm excited about ES6, getting ready for Angular 2. And does anybody have any questions for me?
Go back to your directive. I'm curious about the implement, where it goes in the I directive. Maybe you said that and I just missed it.
I didn't, and frankly, for the I directive, I don't think I even ended up using anything on it. There were one or two properties with TypeScript that iDirective was actually useful for. Let me make sure implements ng iDirective. Now, I have this on my build page, or I'd delete it and recompile and show it to you, but then I'd have to change my service pointers to hit the MongoDB again, or hit Node Express, excuse me. No, that I just threw on there because when I'm reading about TypeScript, I'm like, oh, this is great. And then I never used it, so forgot it was even there. So, no, I don't use anything from ng iDirective. There are a couple of properties. Frankly, I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to go dig into it again. Any other questions? All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was useful, and thank you very much.
Hey, let's give it up for Jamison and AJ one more time. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Those were great presentations, and we wouldn't be here meeting without great speakers like you. So thanks for doing it. We appreciate it.